What we're opening with is some footage of a woman at an outdoor restaurant who is apparently being berated for not making the proper signal. There's actually 2 videos similar to this that's circulating on social media right now. She's being berated for not raising her fist in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, and while the crowd chants, "White silence is violence." Now, what does that actually mean? White silence is violence. It's not that you need to speak up. As a white person, according to this framework, you are supposed to comply. So what that phrase means, white silence is violence, is that non-compliance is violence. And what we're seeing is a steady escalation of the tactics of this movement that are par for the course for some sort of communist revolution or cultural revolution. I'm not saying that the protesters exactly know what they actually want other than power, other than control, and exerting that control over other people is very exhilarating for them. I find it disgusting myself, and I would probably emulate the woman's behavior in that video by just not complying with what they want me to do. Raising a fist doesn't mean anything if it's not coming from a voluntary state of action. Furthermore, joining a crowd in that state is just me losing all of my own self-respect, or the respect of anybody I'm thinking, looking in on that situation from a more or less objective point of view. Now, along with that social pressure, which I've been covering previously, that was circulating on social media and now is breaking out of social media into the streets, as they say, there has also been tons of footage about a protest last night in Kenosha. And what these riots are about in Kenosha is about this man, Jacob Blake. And Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back by police officers for not complying with the police officers after having been tased. Reportedly, he was breaking up a fight. He's got a rap sheet too. And unfortunately, we have another criminal becoming the martyr for this group, or the justification for this group to act out. And I want to show you some footage right now from Shelby Talcott, who filmed this last night in Kenosha.
That's the fuck's gonna happen.
What y'all don't fucking understand is that people have their lives in these businesses too.
We don't know what. We paid for that. We paid for that. Black people.
So what? Just because y'all are too scared to go deal with the cops, y'all just gonna burn the whole town? Yeah, y'all got mace and shit like that. Y'all just take your issues up with them. This is them. No, it's not.
Do you know how many people?
A furniture store is the police. A furniture store is the police. A
I didn't
dealership
say
is the
shit about
police.
the furniture. I'm talking about the PO boxes. This is a state-owned building, bro. This has
Bust my shit.
and you need to go. For real. Business for you in here. That's all.
Hey, I suggest you leave because they ain't playing right now.
Right.
They gonna fuck this shit up.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you. Tell you, bro.
Go ahead. Get my business. I don't give a fuck. Come on up.
We'll burn your stuff down too. We'll burn it down too.
The gentleman in the truck says, what you all don't fucking understand is that people have their lives in these businesses too. And he basically says, if you have a problem with the cops, deal with the cops. Don't go around burning down businesses. They're burning down furniture stores, they're burning down property, they're burning down dealerships, they're ruining people's lives. And the retort to this that I see on Twitter is that property doesn't hold a candle to a black life. If you are more upset with the destruction of property than the destruction of an individual's life, your priorities are all messed up. And that might be somewhat the case, that a life is more important than a livelihood. One can certainly make that argument, and I would agree with that argument. But there's a psychology at work here that is rather naive. Studying and immersing myself in the footage, it really does seem that these writers, they don't have a concept of personal responsibility. They are collectivists in their thought. They are acting out as a group for a group. They don't care about the individual. They have no notion, it seems to me, about the effort that it takes to build something that functions. They see a system and they see a system malfunctioning and they want to tear that system down. And they go through and they tear everything around that system down in a display of defiance against the system. But it seems like they have grown up surrounded by wealth, surrounded by prosperity, have not really known disparity other than relative disparity. And I don't say that to demean the difficulties that certain races or certain demographics have, but I think that the youth, broadly speaking, and this is natural, but it's also natural in a wealthy country for the youth to not really understand just how much effort and toil it takes to make a living on your own. And furthermore, they're sacrificing other people's livelihoods. They're not making a sacrifice for themselves. They're sacrificing other people's property. They're sacrificing other people's livelihoods and then justifying that by, this grand narrative that they want to usher in. And they want to pressure the citizenship and the government to go along with their supposed desires. But I don't know if they're going to get exactly what they want. Criminals are still going to exist, and there's going to be confrontations between law enforcement and criminals. You can't stop that. Now, what the leadership is doing, I don't think is helping matters much either.
Good afternoon. Yesterday, Jacob Blake was shot in the back multiple times in broad daylight in front of his family, friends, and neighbors in Kenosha, Wisconsin. While we do not have yet all the details, and a thorough independent investigation is ongoing, what we do know for certain is that this cannot continue. Jacob is not the first black man or person to have been shot, injured, or mercifully killed at the killed at the hands of the individuals and law enforcement in our state and our country. As I said last night, we have and we will continue to stand with all those who have and continue to demand justice, equity, and accountability for black lives in our country. We must rise to this movement and this moment and meet it with our empathy, our humanity, and a fierce commitment to disrupt the cycle of systemic racism and bias that devastates black families and communities, to see the daily trauma, fear, and exhaustion black Wisconsinites face, and to show up day after day to do the work that needs to be done. As our state reels from another attack on a black man at the hands of law enforcement, as communities grieve and exercise their First Amendment rights to demand justice, and as Jacob Blake fights for his life, we are all reminded that racism is a public health crisis. There is no time to waste.
Last night, as you stated, Jacob Blake was shot in the back 7 times in front of his children. And let me be clear, this was not an accident. This wasn't bad police work. This felt like some sort of vendetta being taken out on a member of our community.
We do not have yet all the details.
The officer's deadly actions attempted to take a person's life in broad daylight. And like many of you, the video is etched into my mind, like so many other past videos that are just like it. It was a video that I would have rather not had to have watched. But the irony isn't lost on me that as Jacob Blake was actually trying to de-escalate a situation in his community, but the responding officer didn't feel the need to do the same. And now we all know Jacob Blake's name.
But it seems to me that the Democratic leaders, which are weak and emotional, always drawing upon empathy, always drawing upon we need more legislation to fix these factors, and they're making all these appeals to emotion. And then the media, the Democratic media, going around and selectively reporting on these things. There was a little flash where CNN accidentally called the protests violent, and then they scrambled that.
Walk us through what you're learning.
That's right, Wolf. Well, there are a lot of investigations playing out right now trying to figure out what led up to Jacob Blake being shot. But what we do know for sure is that people are angry. They have expressed that anger through.
But the weak Democratic leadership is not doing their job of protecting individual citizens. The media is being very selective in showing who's right and who's wrong and basically siding with the collectivists over and over and over again. And then you have the collectivists, the youth, that don't know any better. That I think that they think that all of these businesses, they're just uploaded into the cloud, and all you have to do is download them through insurance and then just rebuild. You just reboot your computer, you just start the game back over and you start where you left off. And that's not the case. They have no understanding of the amount of work that it takes to build and sustain a livelihood. Furthermore, they are not allowed to work right now. The Democratic leadership is halting civilization for this virus and civilization, or the people in the civilization, are going to keep on going, and the youth who are not in school and who are not employed and not able to be in school, not able to be employed, go out and protest, and they're allowed to protest. And then the protest turns to violence, and then just enough pushback from the Democratic leadership occurs for them to maintain their idea of themselves as the peacemakers in this environment. But they are all feeding on each other. And where does that lead the independent citizen? Where does that leave the property owner? Where does that leave the businessman? They have recourse to voting. I guess they have some gun rights, but do they want to enter into all-out war? No, they don't. And I think that the media and the government and the rioters are all leaning on the fact that they can just keep on taking advantage of the independent person, the individual caught in the net of all this justice and change, and being more and more abused by all these different things that I'm detailing. Until what point? Until what is the breaking point? I think a small breaking point, a small catharsis would be to elect Republicans, is to re-elect Donald Trump in an FU kind of maneuver. The larger way is to actually start employing independent contractors to police your district and to police your business. And that will mean that only those who can afford to do that will be able to do that. And that will cause even more disparity from the haves and the have-nots, and the just barely enoughs, which is where a lot of us are going to find ourselves once the economic impact of COVID and the riots take effect. You know, it's really difficult to have more than one position in this nest of chaos, right? You see an individual get shot on camera who's resisting the police. If I was in that position, I would not resist the police. I wouldn't go into my car after the police are tasing me. What's up with that? But it plays into a certain narrative about a system coming down and subjecting an individual to violence and to oppression, the most oppressive sort of violence, which is the robbing of somebody's life, right? Here I am talking about the individual under assault, and what about that individual? What about that individual? And then you have the media picking that up. Then you have the Democratic government saying, this feels like vengeance. Right? We need to act right now. We need to do the work right now. And then you look at all the work that they're doing, and there's a lot of fishy stuff in there. And then there's this narrative about blacks in America, which has a lot of truth value in it, but it's being played over and over and over again to fuel this entire story that causes and wreaks havoc on businesses and destroys the black community. Like the actual functioning black community is destroyed by all these riots coming in. And you have this constant cycle going over and over and over again. And where do we land? And how do you have a position in that? Except to go against these people and to go against that person. And then you're in the camp where we should just all arm ourselves and revert to some sort of state of martial law, right? So I don't have any answers. I'm trying to make sense of this stuff. I do see that there is a lot of manipulation going on. I see young people who don't have any sort of respect for themselves or for other people, and then are using a story about oppression to galvanize and to mobilize to do egregious things. And they don't even have any concept of the cost of their actions. And it doesn't seem like they're ever going to have to pay because of the leniency of the leadership. But they're acting under the guise that the leadership is already too severe. It just feels like we're in this pressure chamber. And all this urgency and passion and violence is happening, and all of this alienation is happening because we're all separated, we're all being forced to separate. I'm waiting for some form of leadership to come along and call upon the best part of ourselves and call us back to being a community, to really call us back to being one nation. And I think that there are certain enemies to that. And those enemies are ideas, right? The ideas in the heads of the youth about justice, the ideas in the heads of certain leadership that's similar to the ideas in the heads of the kids. And then the ways in which the media facilitates this stuff happening by pumping out this story over and over and over again. So I'm just trying to do a little bit to push back, but I hope that I don't push too far, because then I just start making more and more waves in my turn. It's really, really difficult. It's like being in a wave pool and trying to time it just enough to slow down those waves and hoping the people around you catch your drift and slow down the waves and slow down the waves. Anyways, I pray for peace. This is Benjamin Boyce. I hope that you stay cool, calm, and collected, and I will hope to talk to you soon. Good night.